I took the job because my sister needed dialysis twice a week, and I'd been fired from the warehouse for falling asleep during inventory. The security firm that hired me operated out of a strip mall office that smelled like burnt coffee and old carpet. The woman at the desk didn't ask about my resume. She asked if I had reliable transportation and whether I was comfortable with solitude. I said yes to both, which was true enough. She slid a packet across the desk, background check waiver, liability release, direct deposit form, and told me I'd start Monday. Night shift. 12 weeks guaranteed, renewable if both parties agreed. The pay was almost double what I'd been making. Where's the site? I asked. She wrote an address on a sticky note. No street name, just a route number, and the words Delta 13 Access Road past the gravel quarry. What am I guarding? A decommissioned facility. You'll be briefed on site. That should have been my first warning. But I needed the health insurance more than I needed answers. So I signed everything and drove out the following Monday at dusk, 2 hours into farmland that thinned into scrub and shale. Delta 13 sat at the end of a fire road, half swallowed by a low, treeless hill that looked like it had been poured from concrete and left to moss over. The hill was wrong in a way I couldn't articulate, too symmetrical, too still. It rose about 40 feet, crowned with a rusted radio mast and a concrete vent stack that jutted up like a periscope. At the base, a corrugated steel tunnel led into the hillside, wide enough to drive a truck through if you didn't mind scraping paint. Floodlights on motion sensors lit the entry in sickly yellow. A chain-link fence ringed the property, 12 feet high, topped with a single coil of razor wire that hadn't been replaced in decades. The watch office was a prefab box, bolted to a concrete pad just outside the tunnel mouth. Inside, a metal desk, 2 folding chairs, a coffee maker on a card table, a filing cabinet, and a wall of monitors showing grainy feeds from cameras I couldn't see. Everything smelled like dust and electrical heat. Posters from the 1950s hung in frames, a smiling family crouching under a kitchen table. Beneath the words duck and cover, another showing a triangle, with 3 dots and the phrase, Fallout Shelter. Capacity 200. Mr. Keene was waiting for me inside. He was older than I expected, mid-60s maybe, with the kind of thinness that comes from skipped meals and poor sleep. His shirt was buttoned to the collar even though it was warm. He shook my hand without smiling. Noah Salazar. Yes, sir. You'll call me Keene, not Mr. Keene, just Keene. He gestured to the desk. Sit, I sat. He remained standing, hands folded behind his back like a retired officer. This facility was constructed in 1959 as a fallback command post. It was decommissioned in 1992. The interior has been sealed since 1998. You are not here to enter it. You are here to monitor the perimeter, log utility readings, and ensure no one else enters either. The property is privately owned. You will see no other personnel except for Mrs. Yates, who cleans twice a week, and occasionally a relief guard. You will not have a partner on most nights. Understood, I said, though I didn't understand why a sealed bunker needed a night guard at all. Keene set a key ring on the desk, 3 keys, each tagged with faded label tape, then a small black dosimeter on a lanyard, the kind that clips to a belt. It looked like a pager from 1995. This measures radiation. It will chirp occasionally. Ignore it unless it chirps continuously for more than 30 seconds. If that happens, call this number. He set a card beside the dosimeter. The number had a 1-800 prefix. Is there radiation here? No, the device is overly sensitive. It chirps at background levels, cosmic rays, sometimes nothing at all. You'll get used to it. Okay. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a laminated card the size of a playing card, slightly warped at the edges. The plastic was yellowed. The text was single-spaced, printed in a sans serif font that looked like it came from a typewriter retrofitted with a word processor. At the top, in all caps, Delta 13 Night Protocol. He set it on the desk between us and stepped back. Read this alone after I leave. Follow it exactly. Do not improvise. Do not troubleshoot. Do not test the limits of what's written. You're a caretaker, Mr. Salazar, not a hero. If you follow the protocol, you will be safe, and you will be paid. If you do not, the firm will not be held liable for any injuries, psychological or otherwise. I stared at the card. I could see the edges of the text through the plastic, tight lines of instruction. What kind of protocol? The kind you follow, Keene said. "Do you have any other questions?" I had about 40, but the way he asked made it clear he didn't want to answer them. "No," I said. "Good, your shift begins at 2100 hours and ends at 600. Lock the office when you leave. Walk the perimeter once per shift. If the alarms trigger, call the number on the card. If you see anyone on the property, call the same number. Do not engage." He turned toward the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "One more thing. Be off the property before sunrise, not at sunrise before." "Why?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his face that I couldn't name. Exhaustion, maybe. Or pity, because that's the protocol. He left. The door clicked shut, and I heard his truck start up and roll down the gravel road until the sound thinned into nothing. The hill hummed. I don't mean metaphorically. There was a low mechanical hum coming from somewhere inside it, like a transformer buried too deep to service. I told myself it was ventilation, or the residual buzz of old electrical systems. I looked down at the laminated card on the desk. I didn't read it. Not yet. I made coffee first. I checked the camera feeds. Nothing but fence line, scrub, and the tunnel mouth dark and still. I opened the filing cabinet and found reams of old maintenance logs, yellowed inspection sheets, and a red binder labeled Site History that I didn't open. Then I sat down, pulled the laminated card toward me, and read the rules. That was when I realized the job wasn't what I thought it was, and that I'd already agreed to stay. The card had been reissued. I could tell because there was a stamp in the bottom corner, faint but legible, Reissue 1998. Beneath that, in ballpoint pen, someone had written Reverend 3 and a set of initials I couldn't read. The lamination was scarred with shallow scratches, and along the edges the plastic had started to peel. It had been handled. A lot. The text was simple, clean, no preamble, no explanation. Just 9 rules numbered and left aligned. I read them twice before I understood I was supposed to take them seriously. Delta 13 Night, Protocol, after 2200. Do not enter the access tunnel past marker C. The first blast door likes attention. If you hear sprinting in the tunnel, stand still where you are. Do not run. It is older than your fear. If the intercom crackles with your name after midnight, answer with the phrase, "Security control, schedule please." If it gives a time, hang up and wait. If it gives a date, leave the building and walk the fence once. Any clock that reads 0217 has to be turned to the wall. Do not watch it change. If the dosimeter chirps 3 times in quick succession, put your right hand on the red binder in the office and count 40 heartbeats. Do not look at the blast doors during this count. If the emergency lights strobe red, face the floor and say, "Drill complete." It will stop sooner if you do. Never call the lift by yourself. If the inner elevator arrives without being called, send it away by pressing both arrows at once. Do not lean to look down the shaft. At your fort piece, the PA may play a recorded evacuation order. Do not open exterior doors until the end of the message. There will be names. Some will be yours. Be outside before first light. Do not stand in the watch office to see the hill turn grey. I set the card down and stared at it. Then I laughed. It was a short laugh. The kind you make when you're alone and something is so absurd, you need to hear a human sound to reset your brain. I read the rules again. The first blast door likes attention. It is older than your fear. Some will be yours. This was the kind of thing you'd find on a creative writing subreddit. Creepypasta formatted like OSHA compliance. I'd worked night shift at the warehouse for 2 years, and the worst thing I ever encountered was a drunk driver who tried to sleep in the loading bay. Now I was supposed to believe that a decommissioned Cold War bunker had, what ghosts? Rituals? I looked around the office. The monitors showed nothing. The tunnel mouth was dark and empty. The hill hummed, low and even, a sound you could almost ignore if you tried. I picked up the card again and checked the back. Blank, except for a watermark I couldn't quite make out. I held it up to the light. The watermark looked like a seal, circular, with text around the perimeter, but the lamination was too scratched to read it clearly. Someone had gone to the trouble of printing this, laminating it, reissuing it in 1998. That was 26 years ago. And Keene had handed it to me like it was a user manual. I propped the card against the base of the coffee maker and told myself it was liability theater. A way to make guards feel like they were part of something, to keep them alert, to give them a narrative so they didn't quit after 3 nights of staring at empty fields. Old buildings make old men superstitious. That's all this was. I poured a cup of coffee and opened the red binder. Inside were logs, shift reports, handwritten entries dating back to 2003, each one a single page formatted the same way. Date, start time, end time, and a short paragraph summarizing the night. Most were brief. Perimeter clear. No incidents. Routine shift. Utility. Readings normal, but some were longer. March 14, 2011. Dosimeter. Chirped at 01:33. Followed Protocol 5. Event ceased after count. No further issues. June 8, 2015. Heard movement in tunnel at 02:12. Did not investigate per Protocol 2. Remained in office. Movement ceased at 09:19. November 2, 2017. Intercom. Activated at 0:47. Followed. Protocol 3. Given time 02:30. Waited. No. Further contact. I flipped back further. The handwriting changed. Some entries were typed and taped in. One from 1999, written in pencil, said only, "If you hear your name, answer correctly." It knows when you lie. I closed the binder. Outside, the wind picked up. It moved through the fence line with a low singing rasp, like someone drawing a bow across wire. The motion lights kicked on, flooding the tunnel entrance in sickly yellow. Nothing there. Just darkness and the faint sheen of moisture on the corrugated steel walls. I checked the time. 21:47. 13 minutes until I wasn't supposed to go past. Marker C. I hadn't even seen Marker C. yet. I stood, clipped the dosimeter to my belt and grabbed my flashlight. If I was going to spend 12 weeks here, I needed to know what I was looking at. The rules could wait. I wasn't a superstitious person. I'd read the logs, sure. But logs were just stories people told themselves to explain the boring discomfort of working nights in a place that felt wrong. I walked toward the tunnel. The air cooled as I stepped inside. Not by much, maybe 5 degrees, but enough to notice. The tunnel sloped gently downward, wide enough that my footsteps echoed in stereo. The walls were ridged steel, painted olive drab decades ago, and now flaking down to rust in long weeping streaks. Overhead lights ran in a single strand down the center of the ceiling, caged bulbs spaced every 20 feet. Half were out. At 50 feet in, I found Marker A yellow stripe painted on the wall at chest height about 2 inches wide. No label, just the stripe. Marker B was another 100 feet down. Same stripe, same height. The air was cooler now. I could see my breath. Marker C was at the edge of the light. Beyond it, the tunnel curved slightly to the left and descended further. I could see the top edge of the blast door in the distance, a massive circular slab of steel set into a concrete frame, hinges thicker than my torso. It was closed. I assumed it was locked, welded, sealed, as Keane had said. I checked my watch, 21:56, 4 minutes. I stood at Marker C and looked down the tunnel toward the blast door. The light from the overhead bulbs didn't quite reach it. The door sat in shadow, a perfect circle of dark gray against darker gray. And for just a moment, I had the uncomfortable feeling that it wasn't a door at all, that I was looking at something else, something that only resembled a door from a distance. I stepped back, not because I believed the rule, but because I didn't need to go further. There was nothing to see. The blast door was sealed. I was a caretaker, not an explorer. I turned and walked back to the office. At 22:01, I sat down at the desk, poured another cup of coffee, and opened the red binder again. This time I read every entry, slowly, looking for patterns. By midnight, I'd found 3. 1. No one ever went past Marker C after 22. 2. No one ever explained why. 3. Everyone who worked here long enough added a note in the margin of the protocol card, and then stopped writing in the log altogether. I looked at the laminated card, still propped against the coffee maker. I didn't laugh this time. The first 4 hours were paperwork and silence. I walked the perimeter at 23 hours as instructed, following the fence line with my flashlight trained on the ground, watching for footprints or cut wire, or any sign someone had tried to get in. The wind slid along the chain link in long, low pulls, a sound like bowing a cello made of rust. The hill rose to my left, dark and still. The motion lights tracked me in slow arcs, clicking on and off as I passed. I didn't see anyone. I didn't see anything. When I got back to the office, I logged the perimeter check and poured another cup of coffee. The monitors showed the same empty frames they'd shown all night. Tunnel mouth, fence line, gravel access road. The dosimeter on my belt was silent. The intercom on the desk, a metal handset bolted to a control box with a single row of channel selectors, sat cold and dead. Checked the time. 00:38. I opened the red binder again and read the last entry, dated 4 days ago. It said routine shift. No incidents. Perimeter clear. The handwriting was blocky, efficient. It didn't sound scared. It sounded bored. I closed the binder and leaned back in the chair. My eyes felt heavy. I'd been up since 6 that morning, and the hum of the hill was almost soothing now, white noise that filled the gaps in the silence. I thought about my sister, Anna, and whether the insurance had processed yet. I thought about the warehouse, the way the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered at 3 in the morning, and how I used to lean against the loading dock and watch the highway and feel like I was the last person awake in the world. This felt like that, only colder. At 0:41 the intercom crackled, not loud, just a soft pop of static like someone keying a microphone. I sat up. The handset was still in its cradle, but the channel indicator lights were glowing faintly, a dim orange I hadn't noticed before. Then a voice came through, clear, calm, a woman's voice, pleasant and measured, the kind of voice you'd hear in an office or on a customer service line. Noah? I froze, the voice said it again. Noah. My name. My name spoken by a voice I didn't recognize, through an intercom system that shouldn't be active, because there was no one else on the property. My throat went dry. I looked at the monitors. Empty. I looked at the door closed. I reached for the laminated card and read Rule 3 again. If the intercom crackles with your name after midnight, answer with the phrase security control. Schedule, please. If it gives a time, hang up and wait. If it gives a date, leave the building and walk the fence once. I picked up the handset. It was warm. Security control, schedule, please. The voice answered immediately, without hesitation, as if it had been waiting. Drill window. SO2 17. Stay in place. The line went dead. No click, no static. Just silence. I hung up the handset and stared at it. My hand was shaking. I set it back in the cradle and wiped my palm on my jeans. The intercom lights dimmed and went out. A time. It had given me a time, which meant, according to the rule, I was supposed to hang up and wait. I'd done that. Now I was supposed to what? Wait until 02:17? Wait for something to happen. I looked at the wall clock across the office. It was the old kind, round and white with black hands and a red second hand that ticked in stuttering jerks. It read 00:43 an hour and a half until 02:17. I forced myself to breathe slowly. There was an explanation. There had to be. Maybe the intercom was on a loop. Maybe it was a recording triggered by motion sensors, or a prank left over from a previous guard, or a malfunction in the PA system. Old buildings did strange things. Wires crossed. Signals bled through, but it had said my name. No one here knew my name except Keane and the woman at the security firm office. I sat back down and stared at the monitors. The tunnel mouth was empty. The fence line was empty. The access road was empty. I checked the camera feeds one by one, clicking through channels looking for movement, for a shape, for anything, nothing. At 1:12, I heard the footsteps. They came from the tunnel, fast, sprinting. The sound of boot heels on concrete, echoing in sharp, rhythmic bursts that grew louder and closer. Someone running full tilt toward the office. I shot to my feet and turned toward the open doorway that faced the tunnel mouth. The sound kept coming, faster, louder. I could hear the breathing now, ragged, desperate, the sound of someone running for their life. Rule 2. If you hear sprinting in the tunnel, stand still where you are. Do not run. It is older than your fear. Every instinct I had told me to move, to step back into the office, to close the door, to lock it. But the rule said stand still. I planted my feet in the doorway, hands clenched, heart hammering, and waited. The sprinting grew louder, closer. It was inside the tunnel now, maybe 50 feet from the entrance, coming fast. I could hear the echoes layering over each other, the sound of impact and reverberation blending into something that didn't quite sound like footsteps anymore. It sounded like drumming, like something mechanical, like a rhythm too precise to be human. And then it was right in front of me. I didn't see anything, but I felt it pass. A rush of air, warm and dry, swept past my face and shoulders and legs. carrying with it the smell of dust and scorched metal, the kind of smell you get near an overheated engine. The air pressure changed. My ears popped. And then the sound stopped. The tunnel was silent. I stood there, frozen, my pulse roaring in my ears, staring into the dark mouth of the access tunnel. There was nothing there. No shape, no shadow, no retreating footsteps. Just the hum of the hill and the faint buzz of the overhead lights. I stepped back into the office and closed the door. My hands were shaking again. I sat down and pressed my palms flat against the desk, forcing myself to breathe. I checked the monitors. Nothing. I checked the time 01T14. 1 hour until 0217. I pulled the laminated card closer and read the rules again. Slower this time, like a script I needed to memorize. My eyes caught on Rule 4. Any clock that reads 0217 has to be turned to the wall. Do not watch it change. I looked at the wall clock. It read 0116 now, the second hand ticking forward in uneven jumps. I stared at it. The rhythm was wrong. The ticks came too slowly, each one dragging just a fraction longer than it should, like the mechanism was winding down. At 2:16, the clock's second hand stopped. It didn't freeze. It just stopped, hovering between the 9 and the 10, trembling slightly, as if it were pressed against something invisible. The minute hand ticked forward, 2:17. The room felt heavier. The hum of the hill grew louder, or maybe I was just more aware of it now. I stood, walked to the clock and lifted it off its hook. I turned it to face the wall and set it back. I didn't watch it change. I returned to my seat and pulled the red binder onto my lap. My throat was dry as chalk. I paged through the logs again, looking for entries about 0217. I found 3 March 9th, 2010. Clock turned per protocol. No further issues. July 27, 2013. Did not turn clock. Incident lasted 11 minutes. Will not repeat. November 18th, 2016. 02.17 is not time. It is instruction. I closed the binder and set it on the desk. Outside, the wind had stopped. The silence was worse. Eric Dawkins showed up on my second night with a duffel bag and a grin that made me tired just looking at it. He was older than me, mid-30s. Maybe, with the build of someone who used to work out and the gut of someone who'd stopped. He wore a black tactical jacket with too many pockets and a radio clipped to his chest like he was running point on a SWAT team instead of babysitting a hole in the ground. He'd been hired as a floater, he said, to shadow new guards and pick up extra hours when the schedule had gaps. You're Noah, right? He didn't wait for an answer. He dropped his bag on the floor and looked around the office with the casual disappointment of someone inspecting a motel room. This is it? No break room? No vending machine? Just this, I said. Figures. He spotted the coffee maker and poured himself a cup without asking. So what's the deal here? Keane said it's a decommissioned bunker, right? Cold War shit? Yeah. And we're just making sure no one breaks in. Pretty much. He took a sip and made a face. This coffee tastes like it was brewed in a fuel tank. He set the cup down and noticed the laminated card propped against the base of the coffee maker. He picked it up, squinting at it. What's this? Night protocol? He read the first rule aloud, his voice dripping with mockery. Do not enter the access tunnel past Marker C. The first blast door likes attention. He laughed. Are you serious? Who wrote this, Stephen King? It's the site protocol, I said. It's liability voodoo. You know what this is, right? It's so temps don't sue when they spook themselves. Old building, weird noises, isolation. People start seeing shit that isn't there. So the company writes up some spooky rules to make it feel official, and if you freak out, they point to the card and say, well, we warned you. He tossed the card back onto the desk. It's smart, actually. Covers their ass. I didn't argue. I'd thought the same thing 24 hours ago. Eric grabbed his flashlight and headed for the door. I'm going to walk the perimeter. You good here? Yeah, he left. The door swung shut behind him, and I heard his boots crunching on gravel as he walked toward the fence line. I checked the monitors. I could see his flashlight bobbing along the western edge of the property, sweeping left and right in broad arcs. At 22:15, he came back inside, shaking his head. Nothing out there. Not even deer. You get a lot of foot traffic? No, didn't think so. He sat down in the folding chair across from me and leaned back, arms crossed. So what do you do all night? Just sit here. Pretty much. Jesus, and they're paying you for this? Yeah. He shook his head again, amused. Best gig in the world. At 23 Eric stood and stretched. I'm going to check out the tunnel. See what all the fuss is about. Don't go past marker C, I said. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. You serious? The rule says... The rule is bullshit, man. It's a sealed bunker. There's nothing down there. He clipped his flashlight to his belt and headed for the door. I'll be back in 10. I watched him on the monitor as he walked into the tunnel mouth, his flashlight cutting a bright cone through the darkness. He passed marker A, then marker B. At marker C, he paused and looked back toward the camera, his face pale in the infrared feed. He grinned, waved, and kept walking. The dosimeter on my belt chirped once I looked down at it. The digital readout was blank. The device was silent again. A moment later, it chirped again. Then a third time, in quick succession, 3 short. Sharp pulses like a laugh. Rule 5. If the dosimeter chirps 3 times in quick succession, put your right hand on the red binder in the office and count 40 heartbeats. Do not look at the blast doors during this count. I placed my right hand on the red binder, palm flat against the cover, and started counting. 1, 2, 3. My heart was hammering so hard I almost lost track. 4, 5, 6. On the monitor, Eric had reached the blast door. He was standing in front of it, one hand on the steel, looking up at the hinges. His radio crackled with static. 7, 8, 9. A sound came from the tunnel. Low, deep, not mechanical. It was the sound of steel bowing under pressure, the groan of something immense shifting its weight. I kept counting, forcing my eyes to stay on the desk, on the binder, on my own hand. 10, 11, 12. Eric's voice came through his radio, too loud, cutting through the static. It's just old hydraulics. Nothing to worry about. 13, 14, 15. The sound grew deeper. It wasn't bowing anymore. It was exhaling. A long, warm breath pushing through the tunnel like the hill itself was sighing. 16, 17, 18. Eric's flashlight beam jerked on the monitor. He was stepping back from the door now, his posture stiffer, his movements too quick. The blast door didn't move, but something about the way the light played on its surface made it look like it was leaning forward, just slightly, the way a person leans when they're listening. 19, 20, 21. The intercom on the desk crackled. Not the handset. The radio clipped to Eric's chest. I could hear it through the monitor's audio feed. A voice, soft and clear, said one word. Eric. 22, 23, 24. Eric spun around, looking back up the tunnel toward the office. His face was pale. He fumbled with the radio, checked the channel, then looked down at it like it had betrayed him. The radio was off. The power light wasn't even on. 25, 26, 27. He started walking back, faster now, his boots echoing in sharp, uneven beats. The exhaling sound faded. The tunnel was quiet again. 28, 29, 30. I kept counting. 31, 32, 33. Eric burst through the office door, breathing hard, his face flushed. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me, then at the laminated card on the desk. 34, 35, 36. What the hell was that? He said. I didn't answer. 37, 38, 39, 40. I lifted my hand from the binder. The dosimeter on my belt was silent. The monitors showed the tunnel, empty and still. The blast door sat in shadow, unchanged. Eric sank into the chair across from me, his hands shaking. He tried to laugh, but it came out wrong, high and thin like he was forcing it. That was just old building, acoustics, the steel settling. I didn't say anything. He picked up the laminated card and read it again, slower this time. When he finished, he set it down carefully. Like it might break. You followed the rules, he said quietly. Yeah, and it stopped. Yeah. He looked at me for a long moment, then stood and walked to the window. Outside, the hill was dark and still. The motion lights had gone dormant. He stared at it, his reflection pale in the glass. I'm not going back down there, he said. Okay, I mean it. I know. He turned and looked at the card again. What the hell is this place? I didn't have an answer. I wasn't sure I wanted one. Eric stayed the rest of the night, but he didn't leave the office. He didn't joke. He didn't mock the rules. At 05:45, he left before I did, walking fast toward his truck without saying goodbye. I heard later that he transferred off Delta 13 after one more shift. He never told me why. By the end of the first week, the routine had calcified into something I could almost manage. I arrived at 21, logged in, made coffee and walked the perimeter. I stayed in the office after 22A. I answered the intercom when it called my name, turned the clocks when they reached 0217, and counted 40 heartbeats with my hand on the red binder whenever the decimeter chirped 3 times. I left before sunrise. The rules worked. That was the worst part. They worked because they had to, because the alternative was something I didn't want to name. But knowing they worked didn't stop me from wanting to understand why. On my 8th night, during a lull between midnight and 02:00, I opened the red binder and read it cover to cover. It wasn't a safety manual. It was a record of failures. The binder was organized in reverse chronological order, the most recent entries at the front. Each page was a shift report, typed or handwritten, dated and signed by the guard on duty. Most were brief, but scattered throughout were longer entries, annotations, addenda, notes scrawled in margins or clipped to pages with rusted staples. I started at the beginning, with the entry from 4 days ago, the one I'd read on my first night. Routine shift. No incidents. Bland. Forgettable. But clipped to the back of that page was a yellow sticky note, the adhesive dried and curling, with a single line in blue ink. Clock at 0217 turned, it waited. The next entry was from a week earlier. Perimeter clear. Dosimeter protocol followed at a 1:48. No further issues. Beneath that, in pencil, someone had written, "If it chirps 3 times, it's not measuring radiation." It's counting. I turned the page. The entries grew older. The handwriting changed. Some were typed on onion skin paper and taped in with Scotch tape gone amber and brittle. I found an entry from 2006, written in block capitals. "Do not answer the intercom if it uses your middle name. It knows too much by then." Another from 2003. "The blast door does not move." "But it leans." I swear to God it leans. And one from 1999. Written in shaky cursive. "If you feel like someone is standing behind you in the tunnel, do not turn around. Walk forward until you reach marker B. It will not follow past the yellow line." The oldest entries in the binder were purple mimeographs, faded to near illegibility, dated in the early 1960s. The text was sparse, clinical, but the margins were dense with annotations in different hands. Different inks, pencil, ballpoint, felt tip marker. Notes stacked on notes. One from 1962. Command drill initiated at 4:0. Evacuation order broadcast. Personnel responded. Incident logged. See attached. There was no attachment. Beneath it, in cramped handwriting, the names it called were not on the roster. 3 of them were dead. 1 had never existed. I stopped reading and looked at the clock. It was 01:34. My coffee had gone cold. I flipped to the back of the binder where a blue folder was wedged into the rings. It wasn't labeled. I pulled it out and opened it on the desk. Inside were photographs, black and white, grainy, printed on thick photo paper that had yellowed at the edges. The first image showed the access tunnel, shot from the office doorway. The tunnel was empty, but running down the center of the frame was a series of blurred streaks, like motion trails, as if the camera had captured something moving too fast for the shutter speed. The streaks were human-shaped, head, torso, legs, but elongated and smeared like figures caught mid-sprint. The second photograph showed the watch office, empty, shot from the doorway. Every clock on the wall read 0217, the wall clock, the desk clock. Even a wristwatch left on the desk, its face turned toward the camera. The third photograph was a close-up of the blast door seal. The steel was clean, polished, but at the bottom edge, just above the concrete lip, there was a handprint, small, child-sized, pressed into a thin layer of dust on the inside rim of the door. The inside. I stared at the photograph. The blast door had been sealed in 1998. That was what Keane had told me. Welded shut, decommissioned, inaccessible. But the handprint was on the inside, which meant someone or something had touched the door from within after it was sealed. I closed the folder and set it back in the binder. My hands were cold. The dosimeter on my belt chirped once. I looked down at it. The readout was still blank. The device went silent. I didn't move. I counted to 60 in my head, waiting for a second chirp, a third. Nothing came. I looked at the monitors. The tunnel was empty. The blast door sat in shadow, unchanged, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. That the angle was wrong. That the door was a few inches closer to the camera than it had been an hour ago. I forced myself to look away. I opened the folder again and checked the backs of the photographs. 2 were blank. But the third, the close-up of the handprint, had a date stamp. April 12, 1963. I remembered the entry I'd read earlier, the one about the evacuation drill. The one where the names called were not on the roster. The date had been close to that. April 1963. I pulled the binder open again and flipped through the mimeographs until I found it. April 13, 1963. The entry was brief. Command drill concluded. All personnel accounted for. Incident review pending. Beneath it, in the margin, someone had written in shaky ballpoint, "The drill was not a drill." The door was not sealed, and the names it called were the ones who stayed. I closed the binder. The hum of the hill was louder now, or maybe I was just listening more carefully. At 02:16, the wall clock's second hand stopped. I stood, crossed the office, and turned the clock to face the wall. I didn't wait to see it change to 02:17. I sat back down, put my hand on the red binder, and counted 40 heartbeats. When I finished, the hum had returned to its baseline. The office was quiet. The monitors showed nothing. But when I looked at the photograph of the blast door again, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. In the dust around the handprint, there were words. Faint, smudged, almost invisible. I held the photograph closer to the desk lamp and squinted. The words read, "Stay in place." I put the photograph back in the folder. I didn't open the binder again that night. Mrs. Yates arrived at 21 on my 10th night, pushing a wheeled cart with a mop, a bucket, and a canvas bag of cleaning supplies. She was in her mid-60s, thin and upright, with grey hair pulled back in a bun and a face that looked like it had stopped registering surprise decades ago. She wore a blue work shirt with a name tag and moved with the efficiency of someone who'd cleaned the same building 1,000 times and knew exactly how long each task would take. She nodded at me as she came through the door. "You're the new one." "Yeah, Noah, Lydia Yates." She parked the cart by the wall and pulled out a spray bottle and a rag. "I clean the office and the first 30 feet of the tunnel, twice a week. I don't go past marker A, I don't stay past 2140, and I don't ask questions." "Okay," she started wiping down the desk, moving in smooth, methodical strokes. I noticed she didn't touch the red binder or the laminated card propped against the coffee maker. She cleaned around them, leaving a clean margin of space like they were relics under glass. "You read the card?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah." "You follow it?" "Yeah," she nodded. "Good. Then you'll last longer than most." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just watched her work. She moved to the filing cabinet, then the monitors, then the coffee maker, each motion precise and practiced. When she reached the wall clock, she paused. It read 21:14. She looked at it for a moment, then turned it to face the wall. "It's not 02:17, I said. "Doesn't matter. Habit is cheaper than attention." She turned back to me. "You've seen it then?" "The clock, yeah, and you turned it. Yeah, then you know it's not about the time." "It's about what the time means." She sprayed the inside of the empty trash bin and wiped it down. "This place doesn't run on hours. It runs on repetition. You do the same thing enough times, the building learns it, starts to expect it. And when it expects something, it makes space for it. I don't understand." She set the spray bottle down and looked at me, her eyes steady and calm. "Delta 13 isn't haunted. It's habit. It's a place that learned a routine so well it can't let go. The drills, the protocols, the evacuation orders, it all happened so many times in so many shifts that the building started doing it by itself. The intercom doesn't need a person on the other end anymore. The clocks don't need batteries. The tunnel doesn't need anyone running through it. It just keeps going like a script that never got cancelled. That doesn't make sense." "No, it doesn't, but that's what it is." She picked up her rag again. "The rules aren't rules. They're manners. You follow them because the building expects you to. If you don't, it gets confused. And when it gets confused, it tries to fix the problem." "Fix it how?" She didn't answer. She just looked at the tunnel mouth, then back at me. "You hear the sprinting yet?" "Yeah." "Did you run?" "No." "Good, that's the test. If you run, it chases." If you stand still, it passes. It's older than your fear, that's what the card says, right? It means the fear came first. Before the building. Before the bunker. Before the blast doors and the drills and the protocols. The fear was already here and we just built on top of it. I stared at her. What does that mean? It means this hill was wrong long before we dug into it. She zipped her canvas bag and set it on the cart. You want advice? Yeah. Don't improvise. Don't test the rules to see if they're real. They are. And the building is listening. It's always listening. She pushed the cart toward the door, then paused and looked back. 2 more things. Off the record. Okay. If you hear a child on the intercom, unplug it. Wait 1 minute. Plug it back in. If the child is still there, go outside and read the evacuation sign out loud once. The one by the fence. Why? Because the child isn't asking for help. It's counting. She gripped the handle of the cart. Second thing, if the elevator doors open and there's a warm draft, step back and say wrong level. Then press both arrows. Don't lean to look down the shaft. There's nothing down there that needs to see you. There's an elevator? There was. It doesn't go anywhere now, but it still arrives. She looked at me for a long moment and I saw something flicker in her face. Not pity exactly, but recognition. Like she was looking at someone she used to be. You're doing okay, Noah. Better than most. But don't get comfortable. The building likes people who follow the rules. And when it likes you, it starts talking. What does it say? Whatever it thinks you want to hear. She pushed the cart out into the night, and I heard the wheels rattling over gravel as she walked toward her car. At 21:38, I saw her headlights sweep across the monitors as she drove away. I sat at the desk and looked at the laminated card. Then I opened the red binder and turned to the back, where the blue folder was wedged. I pulled out the photograph of the blast door, the one with the handprint and the words in the dust. Stay in place. I thought about what Mrs. Yates had said. The building learns. It expects. It repeats. And I thought about Rule 8 at 4 so the PA may play a recorded evacuation order. Do not open exterior doors until the end of the message. There will be names. Some will be yours. I checked the time, 21:43, 6 hours until 4 or so. I made fresh coffee and turned all the clocks to face the wall. I didn't want to know what time it was anymore. By the end of the second week, I'd learned to sleep during the day with blackout curtains and a fan running to drown out the sound of traffic. I'd learned to eat before my shift, because the coffee at Delta 13 ruined my appetite. I'd learned to check the laminated card before I left the house each night, reading the rules in my car like a pilot's checklist, making sure I could recite them from memory. The rules worked. The building worked. I worked, but the isolation was starting to fray me. I hadn't spoken to my sister in a week. We'd been texting, short messages, logistical updates about her dialysis schedule and the insurance approvals, but I hadn't called. I told myself it was because I didn't want to explain the job, didn't want to hear the worry in her voice. But the truth was that I was afraid I'd slip and tell her about the intercom or the sprinting, or the clock that stopped at 02:17, and I didn't know how to explain something I didn't understand myself. On my 14th night, at 00:32 the intercom crackled. I was ready for it. I picked up the handset before the voice finished saying my name. Security control schedule, please. The voice came back, but it was different this time. Softer. Kinder. Noah? It's Anna. My hand froze on the handset. My sister's name. The voice was saying my sister's name. Anna? My throat was dry. Yeah, it's me. Static washed over the line, then cleared. I'm stuck down in the shaft. The elevator won't come. Can you call it for me? My pulse spiked. I looked at the monitors. The tunnel was empty. The fence line was empty. There was no one on the property except me. Anna, where are you? I told you. I'm in the shaft. The elevator? More static. They're not paying me, Noah. I need help. Just press the button. I looked at Rule 7, never call the lift by yourself. If the inner elevator arrives without being called, send it away by pressing both arrows at once. Do not lean to look down the shaft. And Mrs. Yates's addendum, if the elevator doors open and there's a warm draft, step back and say, wrong level. Then press both arrows. I stared at the handset. The voice sounded like Anna. It had her cadence, her phrasing. But Anna didn't work here. Anna didn't know where Delta 13 was. Anna was at home, probably asleep because dialysis drained her and she went to bed early. Noah, please. It's cold down here, my hand shook. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to press the elevator call button and hear the doors open and see her step out, confused but safe. But the rules had kept me alive for 2 weeks, and every time I followed them, the building let me go. "Security control, schedule please," I said. The voice on the intercom went silent. Then it laughed. It wasn't Anna's laugh. It was a child's laugh, bright, delighted, too loud. It echoed through the handset and seemed to spill out into the room, bouncing off the walls, multiplying. I slammed the handset down. The intercom went dead. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the control box. The channel lights were dark. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them flat against the desk to steady them. Behind me from the tunnel, I heard the sprinting start, fast, urgent, coming toward me in sharp, rhythmic bursts. I turned toward the door and saw the motion lights in the tunnel flicker on in sequence, tracking something moving at full speed up the corridor. Rule 2. Do not run. Stand still. I planted my feet in the doorway and forced myself to breathe. The sprinting grew louder, closer. I could hear the impact of boots on concrete, the ragged gasps of breath, the friction of cloth against air. It was right in front of me now, inches away, and I could feel the heat of it, summer warm, dry, acrid, and then it stopped. The motion light stayed on. The tunnel was empty, but the air in front of me shimmered, like heat rising off asphalt, and for just a moment I saw the outline of something. Tall, thin, hunched before it dissolved into nothing, stepped back into the office and closed the door. My dosimeter chirped. Once, twice, 3 times I put my right hand on the red binder and started. Counting 1, 2, 3. My pulse was hammering. I kept my eyes on the desk, on the binder, on my hand. 4, 5, 6. From somewhere in the tunnel, I heard a sound like steel bowing, a deep, resonant groan that vibrated through the floor and into my bones. 7, 8, 9. The elevator panel on the far wall, an old brass call button I'd barely noticed before, began to glow. A faint, sickly yellow light pulsed beneath the button's surface. 10, 11, 12. The elevator doors set into the wall beside the panel whispered open. I didn't look. I kept counting. 13, 14, 15. A warm draft spilled into the room, carrying the smell of dust and something else, something organic, like wet leaves left to rot. 16, 17, 18. The intercom crackled again. The child's voice sing-song and sweet. 217, 217, 217, 19, 20, 21. I glanced at the wall clock. It was still turned to the wall, but I could hear it ticking, slow, deliberate, each tick dragging longer than the last. 22, 23, 24. Wrong level, I said, my voice hoarse. The draft stopped. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft, meaty sound like lips closing. 25, 26, 27. I finished the count. 40. I lifted my hand from the binder. The dosimeter was silent. The elevator panel had gone dark. The intercom was dead. The tunnel was quiet. I sat down and stared at the monitors. My hands were still shaking. I checked the time on my phone, 0041. 5 hours and 19 minutes until... Far too 5 hours until the PA played the evacuation order. Thought about Rule 8. There will be names. Some will be yours. And I thought about the voice that had said Anna's name, and how it had known exactly what to say to make me want to break the rules. Mrs. Yates had been right. The building was listening. And it was learning. I turned all the clocks to face the wall. I didn't want to give it any more information. At 01:47, the emergency lights began to strobe, not the overhead lights. The emergency lights, red LEDs mounted in the corners of the room, the kind that activate during power failures or evacuation drills. They pulsed in slow, deliberate beats, washing the office in waves of crimson that turned everything into a crime scene. Rule 6. If the emergency lights strobe red, face the floor and say, "Drill complete." It will stop sooner if you do. I dropped my eyes to the concrete and said it aloud. Flat and clear. Drill complete. The strobing stopped. The LEDs went dark. The overhead lights hummed back to full strength. I lifted my head. The office looked normal again, dusty, fluorescent still. But the air felt heavier, like the pressure had dropped. My ears popped. I checked the monitors. The tunnel was empty. The fence line was empty. Everything was in place. At 01:59, the PA system activated. It was an old system, mounted in the corners of the office and wired into the tunnel speakers. The voice that came through was male, calm, authoritative, the kind of voice you'd trust in an emergency. It sounded like a recording from the 1960s, slightly warped with a faint hiss beneath the words. Attention all personnel. Evacuation drill in progress. Proceed to designated exits in an orderly fashion. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Rule 8. At 04Bs, the PA may play a recorded evacuation order. Do not open exterior doors until the end of the message. There will be names. Some will be yours. But it wasn't 04 Joe, it was 01:59. The building was improvising. The voice continued. The following personnel are to report to command immediately. Keene, Yates, Dawkins, Salazar, my name. It said my name. I stayed in my seat. I kept my hands flat on the desk. I did not stand. I did not open the exterior door. The voice kept going. Additional personnel: Fletcher, Ortiz, Chen, Vasquez, Ramirez. I didn't recognize those names. I checked the red binder, flipping through the old logs, scanning for signatures. Fletcher, 1987, Ortiz, 2003, Chen, 1995, Vasquez, 1962, Ramirez, no entry. The voice paused, then added softer, Ana Salazar. My chest tightened. My sister. It was calling my sister's name. I gripped the edge of the desk and forced myself to breathe. It's not real. It's the building. It's habit. It's repetition. It doesn't know her. It just knows what I'm afraid of. The PA went silent. I waited. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then it started again, but the voice was different now, younger. A woman's voice. The same one from the intercom. Noah, the drill window is open. You need to leave the building. Walk the fence. It's 02:17. I looked at the clock, still turned to the wall. I could hear it ticking, each tick coming slower, thicker, like time itself was congealing. Rule 3. If it gives a date, leave the building and walk the fence once. But it hadn't given a date. It had given a time, and I was supposed to stay in place. The intercom crackled. The child's voice. April 12th, 1963. A date. Rule 3. I stood, grabbed my flashlight and walked out the door. The air outside was cold and damp. Sleet had started to fall, light and stinging, turning the gravel to mud. I didn't zip my jacket. I walked to the fence line and started the perimeter, moving clockwise, keeping the hill to my right. The motion lights tracked me. The hum of the hill followed, low and resonant like a transformer buried too deep to reach. I kept walking. My boots sank into the mud with every step. The sleet soaked through my hair, ran down my neck. I didn't look back at the office. I didn't look at the tunnel mouth. I walked the fence once, corner to corner, until I reached the starting point again. Then I stopped, turned, and walked back to the office. The PA was silent. The emergency lights were off. The monitors showed the same empty frames they always did. I sat down, put my hand on the red binder, and counted 40 heartbeats. When I finished, I turned the clocks to face the wall. At 02:14, Eric Dawkins came through the door. He was drenched, breathing hard, his jacket dark with rain. He'd been called in on short notice, he said. Dispatch had heard chatter on the guard channel and thought I might need backup. He didn't explain what kind of chatter. He didn't need to. He looked around the office, his eyes moving to the turned clocks, the red binder, the laminated card on the desk. You okay? He asked. Yeah. You hear the PA? Yeah. Did it call names? Yeah, he nodded slowly. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, more worn. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from me. It called mine, he said quietly. From my truck on the way here. Through the radio. I almost drove off the road. I didn't say anything. He looked at the elevator panel. The brass call button was dark, but the doors beside it were slightly ajar, just a crack, barely visible, like something had wedged itself in the gap. Did you call the elevator? He asked. No. It's open. I know. He stood and walked toward it. I saw his hand move toward the call button. Eric, don't. He stopped. Why? Press both arrows. Say wrong level. Don't look down. That's not... Just do it. He stared at me for a moment, then at the doors. He reached out and pressed both arrows. The button glowed faintly, then dimmed. Wrong level, he said, his voice barely audible. The doors slid shut with a sound like a sigh, soft, wet, final. Something bumped against the inside of the doors. Once, twice, a soft rhythmic tapping like knuckles on metal, then silence. The emergency lights began to strobe again. "Face the floor," I said. "Say drill complete." Eric dropped his eyes. "Drill complete." The strobing stopped. We stood there in the quiet, breathing hard, the hum of the hill wrapping around us like a blanket. At 02:17, every clock in the office ticked forward at once. Even the ones facing the wall, I didn't turn them back around. I just kept counting. I left Delta 13 at 5:52, 8 minutes before sunrise. Eric left ahead of me, his truck fishtailing on the gravel as he sped toward the main road. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't need to. We both knew he wouldn't be back. I locked the office, walked the perimeter one last time, and stood in the parking area with my hands in my pockets, watching the sky turn from black to grey. The hill looked smaller in the pre-dawn light, less imposing. But the hum was still there, low and steady, waiting. Keane arrived at 6:30, driving a white pickup with the company logo on the door. He parked, got out, and walked to the office without acknowledging me. I followed him inside. He moved through the room slowly, his eyes scanning the monitors, the turned clocks, the red binder open on the desk. He picked up the laminated card and studied it, then set it down carefully. "You read," he said. "Yeah?" "You followed." "Yeah." He nodded once, a small weary gesture that looked like approval and exhaustion in equal measure. "Then you'll stay. I need the job, I know." He turned to face me. "Most people don't make it past the first week. They quit, or they break the rules, or they convince themselves it's all in their head and they do something stupid. You didn't. That means you understand. Understand what? That this place doesn't need belief. It just needs compliance." He looked at the tunnel mouth, then back at me. "You'll keep the job as long as you follow the protocol. The pay is good. The hours are consistent. And as long as you leave before sunrise, nothing here will follow you home." "What about Eric?" He transferred. "He won't be back." Keane picked up the laminated card again. "If you want to add to the protocol, you can. Most long-term guards do. Just make sure it's something you've tested." I pulled a Sharpie from the desk drawer and took the card from him. I thought about the intercom, the child's laugh, the way the building had used Anna's name like a key. I wrote, "If the PA calls you kind, do not answer." The bunker does not have kindness. If the intercom gives a date, walk the fence no matter the weather. It counts steps instead of names when you do. If you feel proud you didn't run, leave the office and stand under the sky. Pride is a yes the hill can hear. I handed the card back to Keane. He read the additions, nodded, and set it on the desk. "Good," he said. "Those will help." He left without another word. I sat in the office for a few more minutes staring at the monitors. The tunnel was empty. The blast door sat in shadow, unchanged. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting, that everything here was waiting. At 07 SAO, I drove home. I slept through the day, dreamless and heavy, and woke up at 18s to a text from Anna. "Insurance approved. Next session is Thursday. Thank you." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I got dressed and drove back to Delta 13. Mrs. Yates came by on my 16th night, pushing her cart, her face calm and unreadable. She saw the new lines on the laminated card and nodded. "Good additions," she said. "The Pride one especially. People forget that." She left a thermos of soup on the desk and a pack of adhesive clock covers, little plastic squares you could stick over clock faces to hide the time. "Turn them all," her note read. No faces. I covered every clock in the office that night. Eric never came back. I heard from another guard that he'd taken a job at a hospital, third shift, checking IDs at the ER entrance. He didn't talk about Delta 13. He didn't need to. At 02:17 one night, 3 weeks into the job, I walked past the tunnel mouth and saw something new on the blast door. A handprint. Small low, pressed into the dust at knee height. The same one I'd seen in the photograph. I turned the nearest clock to the wall without looking at the time. I put my hand on the red binder and counted 40 heartbeats. When I finished, the handprint was gone. In late spring, the firm posted another opening. Night guard needed, decommissioned facility. Must be reliable. The new hire showed up on a Tuesday evening, young, mid-20s, wearing a new jacket and city shoes that had never seen mud. His name was Carter. He shook my hand and asked what the job was like. I handed him the keys, the dosimeter, and the laminated card. "Rules?" he said, grinning. "Is this like a haunted house thing?" "Manners," I said. "If it runs, you stand still. If it names you, you ask for the schedule. And if you ever see 0217, turn it to the wall," he laughed. I didn't. I pointed at the hill. "The building is listening. It's always listening. Follow the rules exactly. Don't improvise. Don't test them. Or what?" I looked at the tunnel mouth, then back at him. "Or it starts talking back." I left him there, standing in the office with the card in his hands, and drove home. That night, I dreamed of the blast door opening, but I woke up before I could see what was inside. Far below Delta 13, in the sealed dark beneath the hill, something paused. It had heard footsteps, new footsteps, a new rhythm. It waited, patient and practiced, for the clock to reach 0217, and when it did, it would begin again, because the building always begins again. It only knows how to repeat.